Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township for July 16, 2019. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, if Pastor Luke Carlson come up from St. Paul's Lutheran Church to open us up in prayer.
Let us be in an attitude of prayer, of thanksgiving. Loving and merciful Lord, we are grateful for this evening that you have assembled your leaders together here tonight. May you guide them in the coming hour. May you allow them to be strengthened by your grace and mercy. We are ever grateful that they lead us for protection, for safety, and are ever mindful of somebody else's good before their own. For all those who enter this place and present tonight, may you give them that sense of peace. May your justice prevail. All this we ask in the name of your gracious presence and almighty and merciful peace that strengthens all of God's children. And everybody said, Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we have a public hearing. We'll look for a motion to open the public hearing for a request for approval of a resolution to establish Village Meadows, Plat 5, Streetlight Specialist, 4, Streetlight Special Assessment District, and approval to authorize a change in the consumer's energy lighting contract to include these streetlights.
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Okay, motion to open and public hearing, seconded by Mr. Steiner. At this time, if anybody would like to come forward. Do a roll call vote. Could you take roll?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry? Aye. Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. At this time, if you'd like to come speak on the public hearing, now would be the time to do so. Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Steiner to close the public hearing. Could you please call the roll?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry? Aye. Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, Ms. Hirschberger?
The developer has come in. This is for Village Meadows subdivision Plat 4. There are 2 streetlights being installed. The developer has paid for the streetlights and the installation. And the information that you received is from consumers. Their estimate right now is $46.70 per year per lot. And I would like, if there's no questions,
Any questions from board members, comments?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution authorizing Consumers Energy Company to make changes in the lighting service as provided in the standard lighting contract between Bedford Township and Consumers Energy as presented.
Support.
Okay, motion and supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry? Aye. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Item 2, approval of the...
I need one more, sorry. There's 2 resolutions. Your agenda didn't tell you. The second is to establish Village Meadows Subdivision Phase 4 Streetlight Special Assessment District. This is so that we can assess the parcels within the subdivision, the amount. Like I said, it's $46.70 per lot per parcel, and that's per year. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution to establish the Village Meadows Subdivision Plat 4 Streetlight Special Assessment District as presented.
Support.
Motion supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry? Aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
That's it.
Item 2, approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the platform fire truck.
Already in
Is it,
there. Yeah, it's in
I
there.
thought we said we had to add on this.
No.
Okay, I
This is
missed it
just
on
more
here.
detail.
Okay, this is just the detail, never mind. Withdraw.
I
So you're
probably
not
con-
approving
I
the
probably
agenda?
confused you.
So I'll just make a motion to approve it as submitted.
Support.
Motion and support by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 3, the consent agenda. The agenda committee recommends to, A, approve and place on file the minutes of the July 2nd, 2019 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, accept and place on file the general savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer. C, approve and place on file the revenue expense report and balance sheet for the period ending June 30th, 2019.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Support.
Motion supported by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 4, presentations, we have none. So item 5 is public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes. Come on up. Okay, seeing none, moving on to unfinished business. A, request for approval of a resolution to establish procedure for the processing of requests concerning establishment of the new zoning districts, rezoning of parcels within existing zoning districts, and zoning ordinance amendments. Phil, you want to go over this one?
Sure. Last board meeting, July 2nd, the board asked me to prepare a resolution. Ms. Tinberry had presented this to the board for discussion, and taking the board's lead, I prepared this resolution you have in front of you this evening that would require basically any request for a rezoning or an amendment to the zoning ordinance, anything that this board is required to act upon by the Zoning Enabling Act to follow a certain procedure, and that procedure would involve the, no matter how a request would come in or to whom it would come in at the township hall, that request would be referred to the planning department. The planning department would investigate the request, would prepare an analysis, a written analysis or a memorandum, submit that to the Board of Trustees for the board's consideration, and then the board at a public meeting would determine the appropriate course of action and direct the appropriate commission, could be the planning commission, or the township professional, it might be the planner, it might be legal, to process the request pursuant to the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. So as an example, if someone wanted to amend, would like to amend an existing zoning ordinance, and made that request to anyone at the township hall or any trustee, it would then be referred to planning. They would prepare the analysis, and the board at a public meeting would decide whether or not to act on it, and if so, how. So that's the procedure that's set forth in this resolution.
Okay, comments, Ms. Tinneberry?
I'm concerned about the phrase, "as soon as reasonably possible." I would prefer that to say immediately. I don't know why it couldn't say immediately. It says, and zoning ordinance shall, as soon as reasonably possible, be referred to the Bedford Township Planning Department. I don't know why immediately. Reasonably possible, we all have different definitions of reasonably possible. And let's say something came into the clerk happens to be away at training, and what's reasonably possible? Why couldn't it say immediately, and then her department could forward that on to planning?
It can. I I take into consideration the day-to-day activities that each of the, the trustees or the officials that are here every day take into, I try to take into consideration everything that they have to do and the timing. That's why I use the language as soon as reasonably possible, but it can be changed to immediate.
But it says will be referred to the planning commission. I can't imagine anybody in government being so busy that they can't immediately send it upstairs. I mean.
Well, I think in most cases that it would be.
Can I get some clarification? What do you mean by send it upstairs? You're talking about the clerk. The requests come into the planning department.
No, I'm not talking about the clerk. I'm talking about whomever receives this
Okay.
would be referred to the planning department.
Okay.
I use the clerk so as not to draw attention to the supervisor.
No, that's
but
fine. I just wanted to be
I could have said
clear
the
on it.
supervisor. I'm just making an example. I just think reasonably possible is too iffy in terms of each other person's definition.
I'm fine with it saying that too, because I mean, if a request comes to Trudy or myself or anybody, we direct them immediately to the appropriate department. But I mean, that's with anything. You get a phone call for a department, you transfer the phone call immediately.
Mr. Brony?
I mean,
I think Ms. Timbery probably referred to the clerk too, because she mentioned in the last meeting, because Trudy is the record keeper, she's the document controller, so I think that's probably where you were headed.
well, sure, but
Actually, according to the organizational chart that this board has approved, the planning department happens to be under the clerk. Now, whether or not I think that's right, or whether or not that should be, or whether or not we should amend the organizational chart has nothing to do with as it currently stands.
But unfortunately, since our phone tree's garbage, ordinance department will get planning request. So they would send it up to planning immediately, But I think, I don't know why any request like that would be delayed.
Also, not to create an argument, but to play a bit of devil's advocate, a lot of us field phone calls nights, weekends, even on vacation. And while I'm more than happy to take a phone call on a request, I don't know that I would then turn around if it's Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock and immediately feel compelled. I would wait until likely Monday morning. So that's where I see as soon as reasonably possible makes sense. To me, immediately would almost cause the opposite reaction, that if I now have the inquiry at 7 o'clock at night on Tuesday, well, what's immediately?
Well, the planning department's not.
Well, there's always email, there's always voicemail. I mean, it's, I don't see a problem at all with as soon as reasonably possible, because again, you're judged on your actions. You either did it or you didn't do it. And there's accountability for that. But either way, that language isn't gonna hold up my
No, it's not
favorable
gonna
vote
make
on.
the difference.
Yeah,
I'm
it doesn't
fine
make
with the
a
way it is. I'm fine with the way Nancy says. I think the job's gonna get done either way, the same.
Mr. Supervisor, I think we ought to leave it like it is, because TC just brought up what could happen and probably would happen most of the time. Either the planning is not open that day, immediately means the very next thing after you get that contact. If it's on a weekend, you can't do that, and probably wouldn't want to just email it over the weekend. I think means the same thing. I think we ought to leave it like it is.
Ms.
It doesn't
Tinnery?
box us in.
Ms. Tinnery?
I think we're overthinking that part, because I don't think that people would call a trustee or anybody in the evening to, they come in with the idea and they want to present their, whatever they've laid out. It's not just calling up and saying, I want to get a rezoning, or I think that here, right here is my idea that we all have a different idea of reasonable, and to me, that's not reasonable that anyone would call up and ask for a zoning amendment or a rezoning, or they come in with a plan, and they come into the office. They don't call anybody up, and
Mr. Steiner?
And I sort of see it too. I mean, you could even say, within 24 hours or next business day. But this one goes to Mr. Goldsmith. We're going to establish a procedure for the processing of requests concerning establishing. To establish or rewrite or change, shouldn't that have, I mean, something like that, it really needs to be in writing anyway to request the change. I mean, you just can't go verbally. So, to me, I would say even the next business morning or whatever. It's like, I just can't see somebody making a request to create an ordinance or to make a change to an ordinance just by phone call anyway. Say, put it in writing and explain why and the reasoning behind it.
I mean, it happens. People come into the township hall, or people call our elected officials to talk about this ordinance and could it be amended to accomplish this goal or this objective. It happens. Or a rezoning. What's the possibility of this parcel being rezoned from one zoning classification to another? So as a practical matter, it does happen. This is really keyed into if it requires reaching out to your planning consultant or to your attorney, and if it requires the drafting of documents and so forth. This establishes that procedure. Yes, to your point, Rick, there is an established procedure, and if you want to have a rezoning, and you're going to consider one tonight, it's incumbent upon the landowner to fill out a rezoning application and supplement that with the proper information. But this is geared toward people coming in and saying, I'd like to see this zoning district amended so that this particular use could perhaps occur, maybe as a special land use approval use, that sort of thing. So that's what it's geared to do.
So therefore, discussions, you can say, discussion, if somebody's making a phone call, if it's during business hours, you forward the call. If it's after business hours, the next business day. I mean,
But if let's just say somebody calls me on a Saturday for a zoning request.
they shouldn't be calling.
I'm not-
They should not call any one of
But-
us on a Saturday for a zoning request.
I get it, but I'm saying, I would tell them, you need to call the planning department Monday morning.
Exactly.
I wouldn't say, okay, let me turn it in for you Monday morning. I would direct them to the
Right, and
planning
that's what I
department's
mean.
direction. Email, I would respond and say, hey, you need to talk to Karen or Jody in the planning department about this situation or what you're wanting to do.
Right.
I don't know of anybody on this board that's taken a packet from somebody and says, hey, here's your rezoning, or here's, let me turn it in for you.
Right.
That's not how it works. Okay. Mr. Sperger?
Can I get clarification on two things? One, this will not affect anything that's been submitted so far.
Correct, because this procedure had not yet been established, so correct. It's
So even if it gets
prospective.
approved tonight, this will
Yes.
not affect anything that's already been submitted?
No, it's prospective in nature.
Second, when will it take effect? Do we have to publish it and it takes effect 8 days after that? Is it
No
gonna take a-
publication required. This is a resolution by the board to establish a township board procedure for dealing with these matters, because the board, quite correctly, wants it done in an orderly fashion.
Okay, I just wanted clarification on both.
Sure.
Thank you.
Those are good questions.
Ms. Tinberry?
My question to Phil, why is not the planning commission mentioned here?
The directive I received from the board at the last meeting was planning department, to refer the request to the planning department for analysis and then communication back to the board, this board, for items that ultimately will be decided by this board, which would be rezonings, amendment to rezonings, an amendment to a zoning ordinance, that sort of thing. So I was instructed to set it up so that the inquiries from whatever source and to whomever in township government would go to planning, so they could give an analysis back to you, and then you could make an informed decision as to how it should go at that point. You may direct it to planning commission at that point for further inquiry, further investigation. You may direct your attorney to prepare an ordinance amendment for submission for a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission, and then it goes through the process required by the Zoning Enabling Act. That's why.
So you're not inferring that you can, that this board can bypass the planning
Oh,
commission
it
in a
can.
zoning amendment or a,
No, and that's why it's in here as required by the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. No, this board cannot.
Nope. The process is
cannot
still the same as it's
statutorily
always been.
bypass. This is just the initiation of an inquiry from a landowner or a business owner, and really what it's designed to do is to establish a procedures to streamline the process, to get it to planning. They know their stuff up there. They can talk to whomever the applicant or would-be applicant might be, and then to tell the board, this is what this individual wants, and then take direction from the board at that point, which
Or-
could be to Planning Commission to review it, it could be to me to write an ordinance, it could be to Manick and Smith for
Or,
the
yeah, I was just
planners
gonna say
review.
that, or this board could direct it to Manick Smith. If somebody's on vacation and they're backed up, you could say, hey, this is important, we need to move this forward, send it, this board ultimately would say, hey, we're gonna spend $5,000 on this ordinance to move forward. They would give that direction, so.
are you saying you could bypass planning?
No, I'm saying it's the
Oh.
same process as it always
Well,
is.
you-
This board's gonna tell you, move forward instead of Paul and Trudy and planning, doing it on their own, and then it gets to this board 4 months later to decide on it.
You can never bypass any component of the procedure that's laid out in the Zoning Enabling Act. That has to be followed in every case. The only spot in that procedure that sometimes is bypassed is county planning, because they're not going to have a quorum at their next meeting, and then they pass it right directly to the township board. That oftentimes happens. So,
Quite honestly, I wish we could bypass planning to speed things up, county planning.
well, there's been discussions at the county level that may, in the very near future, happen.
Well, it's
Okay.
not required by law to go to county planning. We've done it as an advisory, in the
Well-
advisory capacity, but
Well, why don't we stop doing it then? Or why don't we
Uh,
figure out a way to stop doing it? If we have an option, because
You-
it takes an extra month of the whole process.
You have to look carefully at the Zoning Enabling Act and the Planning Act, and it's my opinion that we have to refer it there.
Okay, well, I look for a motion to move forward.
Mr. Supervisor, I move that we, excuse me, approve and adopt the resolution to establish the procedure as presented.
Support. Okay, motion is supported by, is that Mr. Montry? Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 7B, request for approval of a resolution authorizing installment purchase agreement to acquire Spartan Gladiator aerial platform fire truck. Mr. Francis?
Excuse me. Excuse me. In the board packet is a memo that I sent around on last Thursday or Friday, explaining the process that we've gone through to acquire the new ladder truck that's out in the front yard. You've seen it if you walked in the building. Briefly, back in March the 6th of 2018, the board authorized the issuance of a purchase order for a 2018 Spartan Gladiator aerial platform fire truck, ladder truck, with a total cost not to exceed $1,125,000, to be delivered about 15 or 16 months later. So it's a long process. The finalized total purchase cost on the new vehicle is $1,101,533 even, which is $23,467 less than the maximum approved amount. The proposed amount to be financed is $1 million, with the remainder being paid with existing funds in the fire millage fund. I studied two plans of financing. One would be an internal funding, where we would loan money from one fund to the fire fund. And legal counsel advised against that, as it is explained in Plan A, and that one I abandoned and am not recommending to the board. Plan B would be to follow the Michigan statute, which allows townships to finance purchases such as this by entering into an installment agreement, a three-way agreement. One with the vendor would sign, the township would sign, and the financial institution, which in this case is Monroe Bank and Trust, would also sign. That is approved by statute and recommended by both our legal counsel and our bond counsel. Attached and in the packet tonight is a copy of the invoice for $1,101,533. The proposed financing is through Monroe Bank and Trust at a offered rate of 3.65%, fixed for the first 5 years. Then thereafter, the payments of interest will be determined based on the taxable equivalent yield to the 5-year U.S. Treasury bond plus 2.65% to the bank. So that happens in 5 years. I don't know which way it's going, up or down, but this is a 10-year amortization schedule. The first 5-year interest rate is locked at 3.65, and the last 5 years, for whatever balance we may have at the end of 5, would be financed at the rate stated here in the memo that was sent out. Does anyone have any questions on anything to do with that? I'll try to answer them best I can.
I just want to thank you for the time you spent really trying to figure out the best possible way to go about this. I mean, this guy was in his office for it seemed like months trying to figure out how we could save 2% by funding it ourselves, and ultimately, you know, we couldn't, be, you know, by legal counsel, but it's, I appreciate that, really, you know, trying to figure out it.
I think we could have done it, but there's some risk involved that, I believe, in the advice given by both legal counsels, that it's not worth the risk. So that's why I didn't recommend that, and I'm recommending this method of finance. There are two resolutions in the board packet tonight. The first one that we need to act on authorizes the township to establish an installment purchase agreement. The second resolution is the actual installment purchase agreement itself, so we need to vote on both. So,
I have a,
discussion?
Mr. Montroy?
So is this not covered by the millage, or is it like,
The payments would be made out of the fire millage funds,
okay,
which is what that millage was.
well, that's what I thought, that's why I was
Yeah.
like, okay.
There's just not enough right now. in the
So you're getting the
funds
loan,
to save.
you're getting the loan to be able to, and then you'll kick it back on the millage, okay.
Any more comments or questions?
It's really helpful to have that $500,000 for the purchase of equipment and large items, because it gives you a 10-year income stream that they can rely on to keep our equipment current and safe. And in the past, it hasn't been that way. The truck that this one is replacing was, what, a 92 model that looks like it rolled off the factory 5 years ago, but you can't get parts for it. But they keep the equipment up tremendously well. It's in great shape. It's just, when parts break down, you can't get them. So we sold that, and I think a dealer bought it for parts that he might sell to somebody else. So, any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Before I make a motion? Okay, Mr. Supervisor, I move that this board accept and adopt the resolution authorizing the creation of the installment purchase agreement as presented.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
Okay, the second one then in the packet is the installment purchase agreement itself, and it's, what, 5 pages long? The dates will have to be tweaked and put in by the bonding attorney when we get that settled. We think the closing is going to be either the 30th of July or the 31st of July. The first payment would be probably October 1st. And the payment is about $30,000 a quarter. A little bit over, a few bucks over that. And we have the income stream to make that payment. So with that being said, I move that we approve the installment purchase agreement as presented.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
We've done this a few times before, 2 or 3 at least that I can remember, and it's the proper way to do it. You pay a little more interest than loaning yourself the money, but it is a risk-free transaction.
Item 7C, request for approval to have Phase 2 report performed for the Michigan Tavern property. So everybody's aware that when Phase 1 was done, there could have been a possibility for a Phase 2 on the property. There was a 55-gallon drum, 3/4 of the way buried, and around that area, it's like walking on bed springs. So it could be nothing. It could just be garbage from an old farmer buried from a long time ago, or it could be contaminated with something. So the Phase 2 study will look at that. It'll test the water that's standing in the basement of the tavern. That's basically what's needed. In the memo, we did talk, I grabbed Mr. Francis, and we had talked to the Realtor about them paying for the study in full. They came back with, they would take $5,000 off the purchase price in the end. So they have no cash in the, to give, so this is the best they could do. Mr. Steiner?
So what is the expected cost of that study? I mean, they said they'd take a 5,000 credit, but what,
It's 10,000 total.
so it is 10, so it's half.
Yeah, it's half.
The reason there's no money is the law firm is handling it for an estate, and they've been paying the taxes, or will be paying the taxes out of those funds, their funds, and they're running short of it because it's been going on for quite a while. That's the reason we have to jump through this hoop.
And if
But
some,
it's something we need to do. We're spending taxpayer money on that part, so we need to make sure that we know what's under there. And this
well,
is-
and if it does come back contaminated, it's another negotiating tool of how much it's gonna cost, what needs to be done. And if it doesn't, the study costs us $5,000 at the end, so. Ms. Tinneberry?
Is there some written agreement that it costs $10,000? I mean, do you have some kind of something from somebody that says it's going to be $10,000?
I thought I had that put in there. It's from,
Yeah, I think that through Manick and Smith, the firm that will be doing the Phase 2 gave us a quote, and it's somewhere, I think we have that written quote, don't we, Paul?
yeah, I thought it was on the agenda before when we,
It may have been, and from my perspective, if I may, when I read the Phase 1 report, and the firm that prepared the Phase 1 report recommended a Phase 2 report, if we do our due diligence correctly, there's no way we should proceed with this project without a Phase 2 report. We may end up not buying this property if the Phase 2 report comes back that it's contaminated and the cost of remediation outweighs the benefit to us purchasing it. So we may not buy it, and you just have to know, based on what the seller has informed us, is that we only get that $5,000 back. They pay $5,000, we pay $5,000 for the Phase 2 report, but only if we close. Because if we elect not to close The money comes at closing back to us, the credit of 5. If we elect not to close because the report is not favorable or it can't be remediated, we're out $10,000. But I got to tell you, that being out $10,000 is a lot less expensive when we're doing our due diligence than being in the chain of title for remediation of a piece of property that's contaminated beyond our expectations. So that's, I mean, we have to, if we're going to go forward with this, we have to do it. So the board has a decision to make as to the expenditure of the dollars. We've been told that the estate that we're purchasing from, or that we have a purchase agreement with, is not liquid, and therefore they will not or cannot, not that they probably cannot, you'd have to go to the beneficiaries, but they will not pay up front. So we wanted them to credit the entire $10,000 at closing if there is a closing. This is what they came back to us with.
Ms.
So
Chinneberry?
So is there something in writing that they agree to this? I mean, these are emails I'm reading here. I don't,
there will be an addendum to the purchase agreement that solidifies this and puts it in the form of a contract, but before that could be done, or before it should be done, the board would have to approve it. Thus, it's on the agenda for your consideration tonight.
so before you go through with the phase 2, there will be something in writing signed by, well, I mean, this isn't even the party, this is some realtor that, how much did the phase 1 cost?
2,500.
So we're talking about 12,500 in addition. Do we have an up-to-date cost now of what, I mean, we were quoted
Nothing's-
a price when we first agreed to try to purchase the property, that it would, that our portion from the road commission was a specified amount, and we keep adding to that. So do we have an up-to-date cost of what this
Well,
roundabout is costing us?
nothing's changed. I mean, it's all the same. The only difference is, $7,500. But, that's, at the end of the day, we have a budgeted amount and we're under it as far as what we've put forward to purchase the property and the studies and, Mr. Francis?
We budgeted $100,000 for the acquisition of the property, the demolition of the property, and the like, and we're way under that. Even with, if we pay this whole $10,000, we're still under that budgeted amount. And the budgeted amount is what we based our number on when we sought board approval earlier on.
Al,
So we're covered.
can you go get me the Phase 2 study? The bill? Not a bill, the quote. We got it emailed, would you? From Barry Bushman, he sent it to you too. Ms. Tinderberry?
My point is, we were given an amount that the road commission would pay this much for this roundabout, the township would pay this much, and this appears to be going over what we have agreed to for our payment of the roundabout. That's my point.
Mr. Francis?
No, that's not true, Nancy. The amount that was used to come up with the allocation of the purchase price between the road commission and us, our part included the total included $100,000 to acquire the building. So we're actually going to come in a little bit less than that. So that means the actual end cost is going to be a little less than we approved earlier. So it's in there. It's not adding to it. It's covered by that.
So our portion of the roundabout was strictly the acquisition of the road right-of-way? It's not what I saw. I saw there was so much for...
It was-
And, Paul, I wish you wouldn't say that's not true, because I get emails from people asking me why I'm lying. I'm not lying. I have an opinion. You may have other facts or whatever, but I'm not lying.
At the end of the day, we got roughly $600,000 for the grant. And then it was $175 from the road commission, cash. There you go, here's a check. And then $175 on our end. And that $175 on our end, we had to get the property, acquire it, and demo the building to get it prepped, and possibly move a water line. So that was part of that. So as far as what Paul's saying, he's right. We are not moving over that budgeted amount on our end with what we're doing so far. And in fact, as far as the quotes go, I've gotten just some, hey, how much would it cost for this type deal? We're gonna be way under.
All I was asking for was an accounting.
We don't have anything
The accounting
exacted.
goes way under. I was just asking for an accounting. As a trustee, I have a right to know what the accounting of our expenses are.
So that's it. We have the phase two. You know, it is, you know, it's close to $10,000. That's why they agreed to pay for half of it.
Yeah, we gotta pay it up front, though.
Yeah, we have to move forward with it. It's getting to be a time thing now, too.
What do they owe in back taxes, Paul? Do you know?
Pardon?
What do they owe in back taxes?
They owe a couple of years, I think, but they're required to pay that at closing. I think they made payments just before it got foreclosed, and that's usually 2 years. I don't have the exact dollar amount,
I
but
was
that's,
just, I was just
that's
curious.
the process. Well, good question.
And just, I'm curious if we can't, I mean, I don't know who, I would think it was Tom talking to him of the, like, for the back and forth on if they wouldn't pay the, like, if we're gonna purchase it, if they wouldn't pay it in full instead of just half.
That request was made to Gerald Miller, who is the realtor, commercial realtor that's handling the transaction on behalf of the seller, the estate. That was communicated to the estate. We wanted them to pay the full amount of the Phase 2 inspection.
We made that offer first, and that's what
Yes.
they came back with. And the realtor said, this is all they're willing to do.
Yeah.
Now,
So
we can go back and say, hey, you know, we can renegotiate and say, hey, 7,500, I mean, we could do that, but you gotta keep in mind, we're on a time frame with this thing too.
we are.
We only had
It's,
so much time to get the deal done with the offer that was made originally.
And depending on what the board's pleasure is tonight, we most likely, if we're going to, and we would, do an addendum to the contract, we would also require an extension of time in which to complete the transaction, because we're not going to close this until we know what the Phase 2 results are. So most likely, the Phase 2 would not be completed and reported for the board's consideration prior to the expiration of the purchase agreement. But it does contain a provision that it can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties. And I would expect that they would do that because they don't have anybody else knocking on their door to purchase the property, nor have they. So they would like to sell to the township. The township would like to purchase based on the township's prior actions in this matter. So that's what we're faced with. I don't know how they would react if, for instance, this board said, no, we want them to pay for the entire Phase 2 at closing. We're still exposed for $10,000 should we choose not to go forward, depending on the results of the Phase 2. I don't know quite frankly, what their response to that
Well,
would be.
that's just it. If we get a Phase 2 that comes back and says, hey, it's gonna cost you $1 million to clean this up, we're out $10,000, $12,500.
Yeah. So, I wanted the board to be aware of that fact, and Paul, you've effectively communicated that. So the question is, do you want to approve going forward paying the $10,000 with the contractual obligation of the seller to give us a credit at $5,000 at closing if the closing can be completed as contemplated by the contract document? That's what you need to decide tonight.
Yeah, I would have liked to see I would have liked to have seen a counteroffer of the full 10 if we purchase, and we'll split if we don't. But like, especially if we're paying it up front. But I mean, like you
Yeah,
said,
that was
it's,
what
like you
was-
said,
that-
you're in a
just so-
you're in a
I mean, that
time
was-
spot, and
That
I
was
get
what
it.
was asked for in the original offer, was them to pay for the whole thing upfront. And
That's where we
This
started.
was their counter.
That's where we started.
So I
We
mean, if
wanted
we
them
go
to
back
pay.
with that same offer, we've already offered that.
That's right. That's where we started. We wanted them to pay upfront for the Phase 2, so we wouldn't be out of pocket, regardless of what happened. If we decided not to proceed based on the results of the Phase 2, they came back with the offer. Then we did ask them, well, you pay at the time of closing, you pay the full 10. Their counter to that was, we'll split it with you at closing, which again exposes us for 10 should we not close.
I think, the motion could be to move forward with the Phase 2 study to not to exceed 10,500. I'll make a motion to move forward with the Phase 2 study with the Manikin Smith Group on the Michigan Tavern property and not to exceed 10,500.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion?
Did you find that memo? Is that why you're saying 10,500?
I know it's really close to that. It's around the 10 mark because they split it in half. But I can't find it in my email, but I know I've seen it. So that's my fault. Discussion, seeing none, I look for, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Peroni?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens? Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
No,
And the motion passed 6-1.
I didn't even vote.
Oh, I thought you said your name. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm so used to it. Sorry about that.
I'm actually voting no because I think they should have just paid for the whole thing.
So the motion passed 5-2. Okay, moving on to new business, 8A, request for approval of vouchers for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, the amount of $73,995.45. Fire District, $31,188.80. Police Fund, $2,069.47. Park Fund, $1,138.05. Library Fund, $8,293.79. Water Revenue Fund, $932.50. Downtown Development Authority, $675. Sewer O&M Fund, $431,268.04. Trust and Agency Fund, $74,471.38, for a grand total of $624,032.48.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion?
Yes, just an explanation of why the sewer O&M fund is so high. It has the bi-monthly operating cost of $408,317 included in that. That's why it's so high this month.
Okay. Any more discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
aye,
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8B, request for final plat approval for Village Meadows subdivision, Plat 5.
4.
Plat 4, I goofed that up again. Thank you, Trudy.
As you can see, the developer has submitted all the payments and bonds and all the submittals and approvals from the Drain and Road Commission. So everything is in order for final approval. And if there are no questions, I would like to make a motion that we approve the final plat for Village Meadows, Plat 4, as all materials have been submitted and payments have been made.
Second.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
is
Ms.
the
Tinneberry?
developer here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have questions.
Come on up.
I
Hi,
think they
Bryce
want-
Mankowski with Village Meadow Holdings.
Is
I
that,
know you-
is that button on? Is that green light on?
Yeah.
Okay, just pull it up. It's closer to his. Thanks.
I know you've been through this many times before, but we've gotten calls about construction traffic. You have already established development there. What kinds of, what things are you going to do to keep the construction traffic from bothering the current residents?
We have a construction route in place, so we only use one entrance to get back to the development.
There's only one entrance into there?
There's two,
Oh, there's two entrances now, currently?
correct.
Okay, I didn't go out there, I should have, I'm sorry.
There's one here and one here.
Yeah, I can't read all that little bitty stuff, I'm sorry. I have vision problems, and this was all too tiny for me, too. I had to get a magnifying glass. Okay, and then is there a buffer along the railroad tracks? Perhaps it's in this more detailed thing, but again, there's just too much little stuff.
No, there's no buffer there.
No buffer, no trees, no anything?
No trees currently,
You're not planting trees?
potentially.
Oh, okay. And then, is this the end? Are there any more plats that it looks like there's a lot more.
Yeah, we're working on future plats.
Do you have any idea how many future houses, what the size of it will be?
With the property we own, we're looking to do 50 more
50
after Plat 4.
After Plat 4? And then, is there potential for another entrance then?
I'm sorry, that's 25 more after Plat 4, 50
Oh, okay.
total.
Okay. Yeah, I like the fact that they're small. I mean, you're not doing 140 homes at once. I think that's a really good idea. So this little printing here said that after 18 months after Plat 3, the construction of Plat 4 will start. Is that like a year and a half? When
This
you're
is
all
for
fin-
Plat 4. Plat 3 was approved, and we put that in over last fall.
Oh, because it says Plat 3 and 4 here.
Yeah, they were approved, the preliminaries were approved together.
Okay.
And then Plat 3 was approved last year and put in the fall of last year.
Okay. And then my last question, are 4-foot sidewalks the norm? Because that seems pretty small.
Yeah,
Yes, it's the norm, or it seems pretty small?
that's the norm.
4 foot? Okay. All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any more comments or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion.
Oh, I have a question, because the Plat Board will ask me, when the Plat Board meeting is convened, Trudy, have all fees that are due Bedford Township been paid?
Correct.
Thank you.
Could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Montroy?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8C, request to rezone from AG Agricultural District to R2A Single Family Residential District on parcel number 5802-014-030-00 and 5802-014-032-10. Also 9696 Lewis Avenue and vacant parcel to the east. Do we have a representative tonight here? Would it come on up? Tell us what you got going on.
Tony Breskel, attorney for Kimberly Spice, the applicant. So what we have is we have 9696 Lewis Avenue, plus the vacant landlocked parcel to the east of it. We are requesting rezoning from ag to R2A, which we have then, if you had a chance to look through the submissions that we gave you from our office, it would be our ultimate intention to go ahead and divide those lands into 3 parcels, 1 acre, 2 1 acres, and 1 acre plus minus a little bit. And we have just a little bit over the frontage to do that.
Questions or
Yeah, I was
comments?
just going to say, you've got my literature in front of you. I know you've all read it. I'll field any questions you have.
Mr. Peroni?
Mr. Steiner?
Just for background, this information originally came to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the request that was made at that time, if we would have approved it, it would have made 3 non-conforming parcels. Therefore, it was turned down at that time. There was a lot of discussion back and forth and said that it would have been just as easy to ask for this particular type of rezoning instead of the variances that were requested. And obviously, that's why Mr. Breskel and his client have come forward requesting now to go to an R2 zoning. After reading in more detail, because I read it from the zoning appeals board standpoint, and now reading it again, and looking at our township engineer, they're recommending more of an R1 instead of an R2A. I think I tend to agree with that. If it's an R2A, the applicant has the capability then of going back again to zoning appeals because circumstances of the property have changed, and they could possibly try to split that into an additional parcel. So with the properties out there, and I know that there's a lot of wooded area there. One of the issues, one of the properties right now is landlocked, so I do agree that bringing that together so they can be able to split it in the current 3 ways proposed. But again, I think an R1 would be more suitable than an R2 at this point due to the surrounding properties.
Ms. Stingery?
I agree with Rick on that, because actually it came to planning. Planning did approve the R2A, but we did have quite a bit of a discussion about the R1. And my thinking is we pay a planner to review this for us. Not saying that we're locked into doing what they say, but if you read on the Planning Commission's referral here, it talks extensively about what Lucy Fortin from Manikin Smith recommended, and she said residential zoning is more appropriate than seeking a variance. Ms. Fortin continues to say the least intense district is R1. And in talking with, there were some people in the audience that came that lived around there, and in talking with them after the Planning Commission meeting, the area is more supportive of less density and not more density. And as Rick said, they would have the opportunity to go back to the BZA and ask for, with R2, to ask for another split because, or realign the parcels because they could have 80 feet of frontage instead of 90 feet of frontage with R1. And that's what Lucy said in her recommendation. And I think that it is an area that tends to be more less dense. It's going north of town. It's past the, or out towards the farming area. I agree too that that making that landlocked piece, combining all of that to get rid of the landlocked piece is a great idea. But I would recommend to the board that we approve the R1 and not the R2.
Mr. Breskel?
All I would indicate is, we've been completely transparent with our request from the minute we went in front of the BZA to this exact moment. We've got a layout. We don't intend to deviate from that layout. So from a very technical standpoint, R1 wouldn't impede that. We could still comply with the layout that we've proposed. But I am still asking for the R2A, mainly because I believe it brings a little bit of harmony to the existing area around it. If you look at your own plat map, there are no R1 zones anywhere near this. Everything out there is R2A or R2B, and that's at your guys' exhibit, not mine, that the planning department prepared. There is no R1 in this area. I found it a little odd that the Manikin Smith group actually recommended that after looking at this map, noting that we have C3, we have R2A, Ag, C3, C1, Ag, R3, R2B, R2A with the Giant Oak property. There's no R1 out there. So keeping in harmony with the existing planning, the existing land uses, and continuity with your guys' master plan, R1 actually deviates from that. So I thought, And I went to planning when I suggested the R2A. I didn't pull it out of the air. I went to the planning department and asked for a recommendation and simply said, what makes the most sense? We looked at the map, and I decided, after looking at the map and taking the opinion of the planning department, oh, there's a lot of R2A and R2B out there. We'll just go right in the middle of the road. There's no other ulterior motivation here. We just want to do what we've proposed to you. I just want to have the request that I've made approved as requested. And honestly, I bring this up because I can't find a example of an R1 out there in this area, so it seems to be a little contrary. And so I did think that was odd that Manick and Smith made that recommendation.
Ms. Stenberg?
Well, R1 is a transition to R2A. The R2A that's out there is subdivision. I don't think you can compare the two because of the acreage. And basically, it's not that much of a change, except you're going down to 80 foot of frontage on a major road, Lewis Avenue. The R2A, I don't see it on Lewis Avenue. And you have ag zoning out there, which is far greater requirements than R1 or R2A.
Any more comments or questions from board members? Tony, did you want to elaborate any more? I mean,
No, I think everybody's probably been by this parcel, this area enough. It's directly across from Help Printers. Whether we're splitting hairs over 10 feet, we need 320 feet of frontage to have 4 parcels there. We don't have it. No matter what this board voted right now, additional township approval from someone has to happen before I could deviate from the plan that I presented to you. I don't have the carte blanche to just go and do it on my own, so this township's protected with R2A or whatever you choose to do. We only can go and do 3 total lots, which were being proposed and which is going to happen without additional approval. So if safeguards were needed, my suggestion would be we would have to follow the normal procedure to deviate from the necessary 320 foot of frontage for 4 lots. We don't have it.
Mr. Steiner, can you speak to that a little bit?
I mean, to what point are you talking about?
I mean, that we're really protected as far as, what you were talking about with the splits and stuff and coming back with it being the R2.
Let me go back here and look at something.
Ms. Tenenberry?
Yeah, I mean, just the comments from Manick and Smith. However, we feel the least intense district, R1, would be more appropriate than the R2A district because the greater minimum lot area requirement, 15,000 square feet instead of 10,000 square feet in R2A, and the minimum lot width requirement, 90 feet instead of 80 feet in R2A. The R1 rezoning would help alleviate the potential greater lot depth to width ratio that may be required should the parcels be split in 3 residential lots. I mean, that's the professional person or entity that we pay to make recommendations. So it says, while the agricultural districts allow single-family residential uses, it requires greater lot size and widths than can be accommodated on these properties. A residential rezoning is more appropriate than seeking the variances, which is what they're here for.
Mr. Supervisor, my final comment would just be, I'm pretty sure that the Planning Commission recommended R2A, and it was a unanimous vote to this board.
It's true. Planning Commission did go along with their request.
Okay, if nobody has any further questions or comments, I'd look for a motion.
I'll make the motion. I would move that the board rezone from ag to R1, single-family residential district on parcel 5802-014-030-00 and 5802-014-032-10, otherwise 9696 Lewis Avenue. That's it.
Okay, we have a Motion on the floor?
Mr. Supervisor, could I ask Ms. Tinnervary to supplement her motion based upon the recommendation of our planning consultant, Manick Smith, and the content of their report?
Based upon the recommendation of our consultant, Manick and Smith, and their report.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion?
Will this need to go back to the county for approval?
No.
Okay.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Is
Or did you
there
have a
a,
comment?
oh, I was just gonna ask if, like, if you had specific reasoning for the R1 outside of that recommendation? Like, I was trying to look like if there's like the width, I don't think is, you're able to do, would be anything to do with. Is there anything depth-wise? Or like, what was is there any other reasoning to go to the R1 beside, like, if the planning department is, I feel like you have conflicting recommendations.
No, the planning department is not recommending. I talked to Jody after the planning commission meeting. It's not the planning department recommending. They only do the review for the planning commission. It's the planning commission voted to approve the R2A, but the Manick and Smith recommended the R1 for those reasons I just said. And it's in your packet.
I'm just curious if that takes into consideration what Mr. Breskel said, because I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's just like, I know what you're saying, and I'm like in line with that, and then I think that's a fair point of just overall congruency.
It is
I
a
was just curious.
congruency.
What?
You're talking about subdivision lots. You're talking about, if you look at the map, do you have it?
This one?
No, well, that you can't have. This one.
Okay.
It shows the zoning. The R2A is it's a subdivision. They subdivided that lot. That's not just, that's something that they went to the state plat board and subdivided that parcel of property that they owned at the time. This is not subdividing. This is just taking the landlocked piece of property and the frontage on Lewis Avenue, combining them and making them 3 lots that mix with what else is on Lewis Avenue. So, and R2A, there's C3, you know, I mean, we talked before about putting R2A next to C3. That's something we don't normally do. And R1 is a less dense zoning.
Okay.
Could you call the roll, please?
One more question. Is
One
this going to change anything that your client wants to do there? Whether it's R1 or R2A, they're still going to be able to do what they want to.
The proposal in front of you can be accomplished with R1, just the same as it could with R2A, and nothing more dense could take place. with
So why would they want R2 then? What's it?
It's just what we applied for.
Okay.
And I applied for it after communication with township officials, who weren't making a recommendation. We were just putting our minds together to come up with what made the most sense after looking at the map and what currently exists there.
And
Because
planning commission.
what's really happening out there is single-family residential living, and I agree with Nancy, the subdivision is R2A, but those lots are no different than the lots we're proposing to create. So if this board saw fit to approve R1, great. If this board didn't, and it, I want an approval of R1 or R2A. Denial defeats my entire purpose. So if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you call the roll?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Montry?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8D, request for approval of TEMACOG 2019-2020 membership. Mr. Pryor, if you can come on up. This board tasked Mr. Pryor of attending these meetings and ultimately reporting to this board at the end of the year. He's done that the last 2 years in a row, and I wanted him to do that again because we've had a lot of discussion as to whether or not we're getting our bang for our buck out of the membership. There's been, a lot of banging heads with that, so I thought it'd be good for Al to come give his opinion to the board because it's a lot of money, and we want to make sure we're getting our money's worth. Ms. Tinnenberry's been saying it for 6-7 years straight that we don't need the membership, and with water being a high priority, I've always kind of said, hey, let's move forward, due to water, or hey, they're partnering with this, but South County Water represents us for water, so we really don't have any representation from this board on water, nor would we with or without a membership. So go ahead, Al.
Basically, I sit on the executive committee, and to say TMCOG is a very fine organization. They've got a very good staff there in terms of what they do. But this has always, over the last couple of years, has been a struggle because we take a look at the pros and cons. We belong to SEMCOG, where we do get grants. I do participate in that. They do a lot for our region overall. The hard part is that we are not going to get any money from Ohio. Nancy has stated that before. They're more involved into the roads that are in Ohio. The water issue, they do work on Lake Erie, but they would continue to work on that regardless. So to quantify this and say, what do we get, we're never going to get dollars. Now, they have participated and gave us some free bike helmets and some free shirts and things of that nature. They still have to provide us with a sewer plan. That we don't need to be a member for that. So I have gone to caucuses. The hard part with the caucuses that it's geared up for Ohio. We govern differently, whether it's their educational system is funded differently, their roads are funded differently, and so on, and in some cases their townships are operated differently. So basically what we take a look at, the reason being is if you're going to belong to TMCOG, it's basically to support a region is what you're doing for the dollars that you're spending.
Comments or questions? Ms. Tinnenberry?
Well, I've been told that you need the seat at the table. Okay, what has your seat gotten you?
Quite honestly, I sit on the executive committee. We're tuned into the reports and so on, but to say that we're voting on legislation that's affecting Bedford, no, we're not. I mean, in terms of our seat. I can represent Bedford, but there's nothing coming across and saying this is specifically Bedford, this is the issue we need to deal with. And like Mr. Supervisor said with the water issue, we have Dave Thompson and Tim Sergo that are on that like crazy. So it isn't like we don't have representation, which we will always have representation for that since we're being a customer. But Nancy, you're right, there's not issues coming to Bedford that.
So has your seat at the table and your voice affected any decisions that have been made for Bedford?
Not really, because I'll go back to this. We really haven't had issues for Bedford. We can't say that TMCOG is helping to bring a new factory or something into Bedford that, hey, we need the support of TMCOG. That hasn't happened.
So you've said that our Drain Commission has a seat there. I know Scott Ossenmacher from the Road Commission used to attend that, so, and Mr. Lang. So we have representation in terms of sewer, water, roads.
Right.
But, let's see, I had another question. So are you, I was going to say admitting, but I'm going to say, are you offering that we could achieve the same, we can go to those meetings.
All the meetings are open to the public.
Exactly. So are you saying that there's no advantage to having a seat at the table?
Well, I think I'd let the board decide that.
In your opinion?
In my opinion.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'll just be real honest. If we really want take a look and say, okay, you're sitting at this meeting. If I'm at a SEMCOG meeting, in which I'm an alternate on that board, and an issue comes up, I have a vote.
You said SEMCOG.
Right, so, but
yeah.
just as a comparison, so
right.
an issue comes up, I can sit there, we can analyze it and say, yes, I think this is good for Bedford or our region, or no, we don't think it's good. I really, in terms of TMCOG, I'm not making those decisions, even on an executive board. Okay, if I vote, and it's for Ohio. I mean, it's like our executive board is saying, okay, this is an issue, this could be for a grant for I-75 or whatever, well, that's great, but it's benefiting Ohio. And this is a tough issue because, like I said, they are a good organization, but,
Oh, I'm not saying they're not a good
Right.
organization, but I don't think our tax dollars should go to support and promote their organization. One last question. Who got the bike helmets?
who got the bike count? We put that out on Facebook. Trudy, did we put that on the website? Yeah.
I think so,
Public came in
yeah.
and got them.
Yeah, and it
Public
was just
came.
first come, first serve. We put it out there, come between this time and
Okay.
we just gave whoever showed up.
I think they were gone within a day or two.
Oh, yeah, they were going
Oh, I'm
pretty quick.
sure.
They were gone within
Right.
4 hours.
Right.
Just wanted to make sure they went to the public.
Oh, no, they went to the public. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a biker. We made sure kids got them and that kind of thing. So that was a good thing because we did have people that wanted to come in and bike, so.
Any more comments and questions?
I just had a quick question. I know that it says in here that the amount that we pay is a 50% discount. Do we have any idea if that's standard, if it's discounted because of the regional relationship, or are other communities getting a 60, 70? Do you have any feeling on that at all?
I would have to call. I think Monroe might still be a member, but I would have to call and find out to see if they're discounted.
You
as
get
well.
the discount if you're a member of both SEMCOG.
Is
and
it?
TMCOG.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
what
so
the
it's-
discount, so they get the discount too, it's the same. And
Yeah,
I did
so I
go back
wasn't-
to them
yeah.
when we got the bill to ask them if they could cut it more, and they won't.
Okay.
So,
We don't get a discount for SEMCOG for being a part of that.
No.
That's what I didn't think.
I'll make a motion that we do not move forward with the TMCOG membership.
I'll second.
Motion supported by Ms. Hershberger. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Peroni?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Montroy?
Aye?
Mr. Clemens?
All right.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Just a very verbose aye.
Mr. Francis?
Okay, and the motion passed 7-0. Item number 9, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes for each individual. Come on up. Do you have something to say, Mr. Guys? Yeah, are you getting up or no? Okay, moving on to comments from township board members. Oh, sure we do. Okay, last chance. Going once, going twice? All right. Mr. Clements?
I have nothing for the good of the order.
Okay. Mr. Montry?
Nothing from me.
Ooh, 2 for 2. Ms. Tinderberry?
Must be some party going on somewhere that I wasn't invited to, but I have several, so just sit back and relax. First of all, I want to give a hearty congratulations to our clerk. We had in the table before us the fact that she has achieved her, well, now it's CMMC. So I know how difficult that is. It's a long process. It's time away from your family. It's a not an easy course, 3 years. And is it still 3 years? Yeah. And so I want to congratulate her for putting so much time into learning in a different way her job so that she can better serve the public. And I just think it's very important that clerks achieve that, and you learn a lot. And now you'll be saying, I agree with Trudy, because Trudy has all the knowledge. So I just think, I just thank you, Trudy, for doing that. To me, it's better for the community as well. I also want to, after listening to the news this week and some of last week, I want to thank this board for being willing to say the Pledge of Allegiance and to honor our country and our flag before our meetings. I felt very proud of this board when I heard of the nonsense that went on elsewhere in our country, and I suppose at one point in time in the future it could come to that, but I would be here at the meetings complaining and raising a ruckus if it did, because I think that's something that's very, very important, that we continue to honor our Constitution. I know that's not in the Constitution, but our forefathers and our founding of America. Also, and along those same lines, I've gotten email ever since the whole business about the prayer, and I mentioned God in the meeting, and I've been rebuked for that. Well, I'm here to say to this board and everybody listening and everybody sitting here, my faith is number one in my life. My husband is number second, but my faith in God comes first. There's nothing in the Constitution or any place that says separation of church and state means that you have to take away what your heart tells you is right. And so I'm not sorry. I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I'm going to say, for those of you who find that offensive, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not changing. My faith comes first, and my love for God and Jesus Christ is foremost in my life. Then, with regard to the meeting, I'm just believing in the purchase. I've not agreed to the roundabout from day one, and that's my opinion again. And I'm believing there's just too much speculation in what it has to be done to acquire this this right-of-way. I totally believe that the road commission is responsible for right-of-way, for purchasing right-of-way. And so if they have to go through that condemnation process or whatever, that's not our responsibility. We won't own the right-of-way, and so I continue to be against that. Then finally, this is my last thing, so you can all wake up. I had said at a previous meeting that I'm going to be bringing ordinances, recommendations or ideas to this board for a decision as to whether we will do ordinance amendments. And I meant to bring one at every meeting, but we weren't able to get together with Damon, the head of the ordinance department, and the attorneys. I want you all to know I met with the attorneys. I spent some money on attorneys, and I'm very happy that we did that. But we just were able to do that yesterday, and so I don't have anything on the agenda tonight for that reason. But I will be bringing the sign ordinance and the it's a zoning ordinance. It has to do with pets and animals, farm-type animals in residential zoning. So those are things that, when you get them, I hope you read them thoroughly to decide what you want to do. Some people like chickens in residential, some people don't. That's the kind of thing that we're going to have to decide to how we want Bedford to be developed, actually. And we'll move on from there. But I didn't have one tonight, but I will have one on a future agenda. Thank you, that's it.
Okay, Mr. Steiner?
Ms. Tenbury, that city was St. Louis, Minnesota, and they have since unanimously voted to bring the pledge back to their meetings.
They did? Oh,
Yes, they did, and it was to loud cheers and screams in the audience.
Wonderful.
They decided,
Which I
and
would
I'll
agree
say that with this board as well, they decided that they have better things to do by taking care of the business. And that's what we do. We need to take care of the township business. Get
They have
all-
better things to do than say the pledge?
No, I'm saying,
Oh.
that's why they decided, put it back in instead of arguing about it.
Oh.
They've got better things to do
I
than
see.
argue about
Okay.
that.
I
So,
gotcha.
so that went back. And I will say, again, add to your comment, the last time I said it, which was just an hour and a half ago, the Pledge of Allegiance also referenced the word God in it. I don't take offense to that either. And as long as you're not trying to tell somebody how to use God in their lives and things like that, if you believe it and you want to refer to God, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I do agree with you.
Thank you.
That's hard to say, isn't it?
Thank you?
No, I agree with you.
No.
No, that I agree with you. I'm kidding.
Oh, that's hard, yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
I'm
That would be
kidding.
hard for you to say.
I'm just kidding. And I too also congratulate Trudy for all of your hard work. I know that you take your job very serious, and there's nothing like learning, especially, when there's things that change consistently, and with our technology and the way that just life changes in general these days. If you're not going to go get educated, things are going to happen that we're not going to be prepared for. So this prepares you for those things that come up in the future. So again, thanks for your time and efforts to make sure that you're taking care of the township business with your time. I mean, you're paid to do it, but I mean, it is somewhat your free time because it's over and above some of the hours. Some of it's township hours, but there's a lot of extra hours outside of township. So thank you for that. And we, last but not least, the 4th of July holiday. I didn't try to count everything that took place, but there was probably a few episodes where the fire department might have had an issue or two, but I didn't get any calls from anybody this year, so things must have been a little bit better. So like I said at the last meeting, I asked people to be respectful of your neighbors when it comes to shooting off fireworks, and don't try to close off roadways, et cetera. So hopefully that's what took place, and I'll thank you for that now. That's all.
Mr. Francis?
I'd like to echo Nancy's accolades for Trudy. It's something that she worked very hard for, and it's, I think, a valuable asset to our township for our clerk to have that certification. I think Nancy agrees with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, accolades. The other thing, earlier, I think you thanked me for working on the fire truck purchase and the like. The people that need to be thanked, some of them are sitting right over there, especially the chief. They had a committee that worked on that for hours and hours and hours and hours on what kind of vehicle we need to protect our residents. They're the ones that deserve the thanks for the hard work, not me.
Well, I rescind my thank you to them then. Ms. Hirschberger?
Before you, I laid in front of everyone so you had the information. At the prior meeting, when we purchased the new laptops, I said I was going to go ahead and sell the old ones. I did some research. They're not worth very much. I'm going to try and get $50 a piece, but I am still going to keep half of them in case we want to go to paperless packets, or just so we have an extra one, or in the township, we get asked for one every so often. That's all I have.
Okay. Well, Chief, I want to thank you guys for all your hard work on that fire truck. And I guess I was thanking Paul on a different end. All the time he spent trying to figure out the financing. But yeah, I agree with what everybody else said too. Congratulations, Trudy. I see your hard work, and it is nice knowing we have experienced people at the township, and you're definitely one of them in your area, so I appreciate that. It's funny, it's not funny, but it's crazy to me to think that a lot of people in the township still don't realize we have a service with Mulch King. We've put it out there in the papers, on website, Facebook, word of mouth and everything, but keep in mind, we have this service with Mulch King that we budget for, and we partner with them to where you could take your leaves, your grass, your brush and sticks or whatever to a certain size. 9 months out of the year, I think it's the months off are January and February, March, or December, January, February, something like that, I think. So keep that in mind, utilize that. If you need to find out any road closures, go to the Bedford Township webpage or Monroe County Road Commission's webpage. They are working right now on Whiteford Center. They got it all milled up and moving forward. So that's coming along. TAP grants moving along. We got the confirmation from the Road Commission at their meeting last week. They're all moving forward with it, and so that'll be happening. And Nancy, did you budget for those attorney fees?
Yes.
You did? Okay, good. I was just making sure. so.
Since it was ordinance, it came out of ordinance.
Oh,
They don't know it yet.
okay, all right, I was just making sure. Okay, if no further comments, we stand adjourned.